Hello, I'm Angela Kavanaugh, the Executive Director of CAI. I would like to welcome all attendees and thank our partners, the Board of Directors, and the CAI team for today's program. Few housekeeping rules. Today, all participants will be muted. Please type your questions into the question box, and please be sure to state the panelists that you would like the question directed to. If you need a certificate for manager credits, please email Jackie at jacqueline@CAI-NJ.org. And just a note that you must be in attendance for the entire presentation to receive a certificate. I would now like to introduce Steve Molenik of the Membership Committee. Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you, Angela, and good afternoon, everybody. As was mentioned, I'm currently Vice Chair of the CAI Membership Committee, so if you'll indulge me for just a minute, many of you are members of CAI. Some of you have your memberships that may soon be expiring, and others may not be CAI members. But this is an opportunity for you to see some of the educational opportunities that CAI brings, as well as many other opportunities. Now at the time of COVID, it's not the same, as we all know, with the ability to go out and network and have the various events, whether it's the expo or the spring event or the beach party, but there's still plenty that CAI is doing to bring our community together, whether you be association members, managers, or business partners. So there are tremendous opportunities within CAI. So we encourage you to keep up on your membership. Reach out to us if you have any questions, whether it's any of our wonderful staff members or anybody on the membership committee. If you have any questions or want to learn more about the things that we're doing during COVID and planning for the future post-COVID, always feel free to reach out. Our doors are open, and we look forward to spending many years with you all as our members. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, today we're going to start with Michael. Michael Mandillo is an equity partner with FirstService Residential, the largest residential management company in North America. As president and principal, Michael's responsibilities include client retention, leadership development, culture building, organizational growth, and strategic initiatives. Michael possesses firsthand knowledge of industry and corporate trends and challenges, having directly pitched and closed some of the largest communities in the region. Today, Michael will be discussing motivating and guiding board members. Michael?
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, CAI, for this opportunity for all of us. And I think to start off by saying that I hope all of our participants and everyone throughout the industry, their families are safe and well, because at the end of the day, this is and the most important part is our well-being. It kind of folds in well with the topic today, guiding and motivating. Two very important, I think, words that need to work collaboratively together with boards and the community. And these are just some tips over the next 10, 15 minutes that I'm going to share with you, and some experiences that we have seen over the last 28 weeks that we have been in this pandemic. So you think about that, 28 weeks, that's half of a year that we were placed into an environment that I'll call was hit by gravity, something that we all didn't have a choice to be in, but we all found ourselves in this choice. And right from the beginning, community association management found themselves in an essential role. And important to know, essential role is meaning that at the community level, these roles, these leaderships and the teams were permitted and were expected to be at the property and at their communities. And even portfolio managers, while they're not there on day-to-days at their communities, but they do inspections, and they are part of the community, keep it coming along. We took that very, very serious within the first 2 weeks of this pandemic in mid-March. But from a board perspective, let's think about and go back 28 weeks ago of what we were put into. A lot of unknowns. Number one, as we know, board members are in a non-compensatory role. These are volunteer positions. What we found in the first 3 to 5 weeks is that as a whole, our communities, including some of the boards, were like us, trying to figure out what was going on and what was happening to this country and how do we handle it. And in those situations is what's the first thing we kind of all tend to is we tend to our personal needs, our families, our friends. And because this pandemic hit stuff of an isolation, it did create kind of awareness of what can we do and what should we be doing about our own personal health and family. The other part of it was people in their job situation, were their jobs secure or what do their jobs look like? What that did is it created a bit of a calm before the storm. And our customer care center was down about 25% in the amount of calls that were coming in within the first 2 to 3 weeks, which basically were showing the statistics that people were not really paying attention to the communities per se. They were paying attention to what is going on in the environment and the world, I should say, as well as in their personal lives. That ended in about 2 to 3 weeks, and then it really started to come towards the focus of the communities. And in that beginning time, the volunteers, I see that right from the beginning really truly stepped up as community leaders and owning the volunteer role, including balancing their own personal lives with their families, with the health concerns and or protecting in quarantine situations. And then at the same time, their financial position may be if they had jobs that might have been at jeopardy. So a huge shout out to all of our boards across this industry of how committed they showed themselves right from the beginning to jump in and dial into this. And in the beginning, we saw it so important that the lean into position, the lean into position is one of where we say, is it playing offense or defense? In situations like this, it's both. But a lot of people do lean more towards the defense side, but you do have to play offense and recognize what are the things that you can do. That's a collaborative approach through the professionals that surround your community. So it can be from attorneys to engineers to accountants to the professionals that deal with it, and most importantly, your management company. And in the beginning, the important part of this, and by the way, this is definitely strong throughout the weeks ahead, because unfortunately, I don't think we're out of the weeds yet, if you will. But educating is so important that all of us in the management side on, are we essential at the properties? Are we creating any tools to educate? May it be through webinars. We've done 40 webinars through the 28 weeks and trying our best to bring educational topics in real-time situation needed issues. Best practices aren't just communicating what's happening in other communities. It's gathering data and creating standard operating procedures in these type of crisis modes to share through the process. Now, these processes have to be monitored. In the beginning, they were monitored daily and hour, but even as we are into week 28, they still have to be monitored weekly because things change. Every state has different laws and governing rules, and then it comes down to the county, the town, and then it comes to the community itself as well. So it's not just taking the CDC guidelines and cutting and pasting them and sharing them. It's taking them and seeing them, how truly does it affect each of the communities, because each community has a different culture and a different need. There are homeowners associations, there are condominium complexes, there are sited condos, there are large scale lifestyle communities that are highly amenitized, and then there's your high-rise communities. Each one of these bear down to have a need for each of the roles and the expectations. As our offices, our regional offices became more remote, our sighted were staffed. But then we had to make sure on how are we communicating with the boards, and how can we communicate as management companies with the boards in also training through virtual. So it changes the old school, I'll say, face-to-face training and interactions to how are we bringing this to our associates and the community leaders, the boards, on bringing training through a virtual process. And this requires a lot of attention in specifically finding what works for each of the communities. Regular communication, that term has been used, but I'm not sure if people are really identifying what is regular. Regular can be daily, and it definitely is weekly. It is not monthly. They're even to the point of communities want to know that the boards and the management companies are collaborating together, even if there isn't any new news, sometimes reiterating the news and letting the people know that you're there through different types of communications. We're big believers in that. In the beginning, they were downloading to the communities what on a daily basis was done, having a paper trail for that. Every week, following up on what weekly has been accomplished. And when our managers were at the property doing inspections, we wanted to provide a video to assure the community and the board that we were there from the beginning and continued to. And by the way, we all in the management industry, and that's including the vendors and the professionals, also have personal lives and also have personal challenges. So collaborating that along with balancing that is a very difficult act, because in all fairness, no one has ever gone through this type of crisis. We have experienced in this industry from 9/11 to 2 economic downturns. We have dealt with snowstorms, blizzards, hurricanes, and superstorms. But we have never dealt with something so global for such a long time. So the communication, because if people are silent, they're going to assume no one is there. Communication is important weekly, and in some cases, it may be daily as well. Also, I think what's important is leaning into the support for the manager who's collaborating from the front line with the boards is very important. The support of the team internally on the management side, extremely, extremely important, but also reinforcing that support with the boards as well, and not leaving the managers solely alone to make decisions, because in fairness, the amount of pressure and weight that is put on the managers across the country has been the most demanding in my 30 years experience in this industry. And I know that the managers are incredibly professional and tough, but we're all human. We need support, and we need to work and create collaborative situations along that. Sharing those experiences are incredibly important along the way. And again, some stats, our customer service support was averaging wait time of, I believe, around 69 seconds, which means people that were waiting to connect with our professionals in the customer care center were waiting anywhere from, on average, about 1 minute and 9 seconds. And we were monitoring that, because we know that people want answers and they want them quickly. But at the same time, we saw a 300% uptick when it came to the amount of calls coming in from week 6 on. And again, we're into week 28. It has leveled off for sure on that, but it's important for that. And again, the length of the time of those calls were about 5 minutes and 4 seconds each of those calls, and 74% of those were resolved on the first call. Now, why are we sharing this data? It's important as a community and board members and managers and management companies and vendors to know that sometimes what we don't see, we don't know what's happening. So the old adage of We know what we know, we don't know what we don't know. It is so important that we work together as a team as we move on to the next slide to ensure the vision and the alignment is so important. I am telling you that we've seen the most bravest of board members step up during these times, during these communications of dealing with very tough situations in communities that have absolutely wavered of where, it was like split. People who were pro opening up amenities and people who were anti opening it. Either way you chose, you weren't really winning on this situation. And we have seen a huge uptick, the most in my career that we've been monitoring, to a point of where we have seen board turnover. And this is from, again, the fatigue side of this, I think of trying to do our best as a team to educate the residents on just really what has been happening over these weeks on a regular basis is so important, because again, the community volunteer people have done an outstanding job, and the support along all the professionals that surround the communities as well. But you know what? In the beginning, there was a little bit of a kind of a holding hands, a little kumbaya feel in the beginning few weeks of the pandemic. And as weeks went on and people started to realize frustration started to build, the human factor kicked in, the human factor. And when that human factor kicked in, people fall into categories. There's rule followers, rule breakers, and rule enforcers. And each one of those fall into a category of having their opinion, which of course they're entitled to, the residents. But at the same time, we have to be supporting our boards who are volunteering in the decisions you make, the best decisions you make by gathering all the tools that you can. It is important that you stand behind those decisions, but stay curious through the process. Stay open-minded through the process. Know that things can and will change. We still have time ahead of us, I think, before we can see bright light. We will see bright light, but no one has the crystal ball that can tell you exactly when, but we have to anticipate that to happen. So I encourage all of us to continue to stay curious, stay grounded through this process, be good listeners. Make sure that we're communicating, we're pulling in all the professionals to get the advice and then making sound decisions. Show appreciations. Empathy is important during this time, and leadership is the most important part of it. Celebrate those victories that we may see or opportunities that might be positive to share with your communities. Lean in, folks. Lean in. Ask those questions and stay connected and keep the lines of communication going. I wish you all the best and the great health during this process, and we will come out stronger for sure. Back to you, Angela.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. We have a few questions for you. The first one, how do you work with board members of your communities to help with the fatigue and stress that you are experiencing?
Wow. Yeah. So that's not a one-trick pony, because again, depending on all of us and how long our fuse is in tolerating, areas of when you kind of throw the towel in and say, I'm done. It's hard to give one answer, but I would say this: when signs are happening, may it come from fellow board members or even managers, when you see and know your fellow team and start to see them maybe agitated, that's the time to jump in and give those people some time to either disconnect for a while and relax, but don't let those signs go, because when you catch them too late, you're at the end of that rope. So my suggestion would be aware, catch the signs early, and communicate one-on-one with the individuals to see if they are and what would be the best way handle that fatigue.
We have another question. Thank you. What type of education was most needed?
Wow. Well, I think it was a couple of areas. I think, there was a couple of moving parts. One is, redirecting our focus to being virtual when needed. But most importantly, I think the education part on the local local governing and documents for the town, the state, the county, of exactly what we can and can't do during the COVID time. And that was moving rapidly. So I think the most important part of that is, what is our situation today and where are we gathering that information and how are we sharing that information to then sit and decide what's the best way to resolve it. So I would say, during this time, it was definitely, what were the rules given to us to then take and then figure out what we want to do in our communities as well.
Okay, we have time for one more question. What kind of support could the board expect from their management company?
Well, definitely a support is not just from the manager. There needs to be weekly, bi-weekly communication from the support team of the management company. And those supports have to come from guiding on insurance, along with your insurance experts, legal, along with your legal experts. It's also about best practices at other communities similar to theirs, of what they are seeing that's working versus what they see that are challenging, and how you put that in front in writing to then discuss and or see what's best use for them as well.
Okay, those are all the questions we have for now for Michael. And if anyone has any other questions, we will be circling back. So feel free to put them into the question box. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jordan. Jordan Beam is a property manager, construction inspector in the Community Association Department of D.W. Smith, with over 35 years of experience in construction and construction management, property management, and engineering services. His background includes project management for the residential and commercial construction projects throughout the Northeast. Jordan's extensive history in both construction and engineering services has enabled him to become an essential part of D.W. Smith's Community Association Services team. He specializes in all aspects of community association services. Mr. Beam is involved in the preparation of expert reports and inspections, as well as identifying construction-related issues, both efficiently and expeditiously. Today, Jordan will be discussing implementing maintenance programs. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you very much, Angela. I just want to thank the CAI for allowing D.W. Smith, PS&S, the opportunity to be one of the speakers today. As far as touching base with the preventative maintenance program that communities should be implementing, the one thing is construction hasn't stopped. It's still moving forward. Especially in community associations that are older, they still need to move forward to look at getting stuff done and not holding off, because that's just going to cause more issues later on down the road. The one issue would be as far as preventative maintenance, as far as roofing goes. The one thing I would like to say is, like, after a winter storm, have somebody, a company or an engineering firm, or even if you have a maintenance guy on site, to walk around and just visually inspect the roofs, even from the ground, to see if there's any missing shingles or anything like that. And if there is, get them fixed right away, because that will help prevent any water infiltration into a homeowner's unit. The other thing is you guys, most property managers have gutter cleaning once a year. Have that company go up there and look in the gutters to see how much aggregate loss off the asphalts that happened during a winter storm. That would also dictate the life expectancy of the roof shingles that you have. Also, how old your community is, depending on how old it is. And if you look into your reserve studies, it'll tell you what your life expectancy is when you're supposed to be doing your roofs as well. The other thing to touch on is asphalt. Asphalt is another key thing for preventative maintenance. We know there's a lot of cracking, alligatoring, especially on how old your community is. If you see a lot of cracks in your asphalt, the main thing what you could do is crack fill it, and make sure that you maintain it, because if you don't maintain the cracks in the asphalt, all the water infiltration goes in and it could disrupt and disturb the subgrade underneath, which can cause more damage. So my suggestion to that would be to crack fill it, and then every 3 to 5 years do an extensive crack fill and seal coat. That'll extend the life of your asphalt for a few more years until it's time for you to actually do a full asphalt replacement. The other one big thing that we come across is basins, retention basins, and basins on communities that have ponds and retention basins that are just basically for water to flow through. O&M manuals are actually a high thing for people that have a lot of retention and detention basins on their site, only because it'll give the maintenance crew time to go and look to make sure that there's not overgrown vegetation that could stop the flow of water. Make sure that you go to all your outfall structures and make sure that they're clear of debris. The other key thing is your ripraps, which are the stones that come out of the outfalls. You want to make sure that they're clean of soils and debris and stuff like that, so water can flow freely to get to the tributary streams where the water actually ends up. The other thing is bulkheads. Bulkheads are another key thing for detention basins. You want to inspect them on an annual basis. If you do have a maintenance crew or a maintenance guy that comes out, just have them walk over and check to see if there's any deteriorated materials, deteriorated lumber, rusted lag bolts or anything like that. If it's leaning or anything like that, you really want to stay on top of doing preventative maintenance on your site. The reason why you want to do that is because that'll prolong it a little bit longer than before you have to start replacing it. As an engineering firm, we are still strong. We're still moving forward. We're staying busy. That doesn't stop the board or the property manager from also doing their due diligence as to getting an engineering firm in there to actually help out with this process. If you don't have a contractor on site, we're here to help as an engineering firm to come out there and do pre-inspections, prioritizations of roofs, asphalt, bulkheads, and stuff like that, and also give you an outline of when things should be done and replaced. And as far as this the pandemic, and yeah, I'm hoping everybody is safe, and I'm hoping that that we can continue moving forward. But the boards and as far as the property management, we're still here for you guys. So if there is anything that we can do to help you guys out moving forward, we're definitely open to that. Our phones, are always open to you guys. Communication is definitely key. Customer service is 100% our goal as an engineering firm, is to make sure that you guys are taken care of. And as far as I kind of lost my train of thought there, but we're here for you guys. And I know with Jennifer and myself and Pam, who is our client liaison, we took D.W. Smith on the road to educate property managers on roofing, asphalt, stormwater management. And we can continue doing that, not in person and going to the actual facilities, but we could do it virtually now. And we would like to also not just do the property managers, but we like to get boards together and start educating the boards as well. So this way here, if they're using an engineering firm, they have the right questions to ask. There's never a stupid question. We're always here. Our phones are always open, and we'd be more than happy to help you guys in any aspect of construction.
Thank you, Jordan. We have a few questions from the audience today. First one, how can I tell if my roof is deteriorating?
Basically, like I said, once a year, what you do is you have a gutter cleaning company come out there and they do a gutter cleaning. The main thing we ask a lot of property managers to do is ask that company, take a picture of how much aggregate, which is the granulars that are off the shingle itself, how much of that is actually in the gutter. If there's an enormous amount of aggregate in your gutter, that means your shingles are starting to deteriorate, and it's starting to look at maybe replacing it, and also looking at your reserve, because your reserve is also going to dictate when it's time for you to get your roofs done.
Okay, and another question, what is the biggest importance of using an engineering firm?
The biggest importance in using an engineering firm is we're all highly educated in the construction field. So basically, the importance is when we come out, we kind of help you along instead of we can just go ahead and just do specifications, but we'd like to help you guys out and maybe looking at it and inspecting it first to determine if it's needed to be done. The second thing is to prioritize it, especially in larger communities, because you're not going to do, say, 30 roofs in 1 year unless you have a bankroll of a few $1 million. But a lot of times it gets phased out. And the other thing is we all have bidders, contractors that bid on this job that are qualified master elite installers, whether it be even Asphalt. They're all in their companies, and they all have basically the knowledge, and we know exactly. We've been working with them for over the past 10 years that we've been doing condo association, homeowner association. So using an engineer is very important.
All right. Those are all the questions we have for you right now. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them into the question box. Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next, we have Steve Olenick. Steve is a partner in the Redevelopment and Land Use and Real Estate Department at Greenbaum, Rowe, Smith & Davis. As a member of the firm's Community Association Practice Group, he maintains a strong focus in the niche of community association law, providing strategic guidance and general counseling to condominium and homeowners association clients across a broad range of legal issues. His work encompasses the interpretation and amendment of governing documents and bylaws, drafting contracts, collection of delinquent assessments, and enforcement rules and regulations, operational and maintenance issues, the fiduciary responsibilities of board members, transition negotiations, and litigation, Municipal Services Act compliance, and alternative dispute resolution. An active member of CAI, Mr. Molenik currently serves as the Vice Chair of the Membership Committee. He was recognized as CAI-NJ's 2016 Speaker of the Year Award and shared the recipient of the 2014 Committee of the Year Award and as a member of CAI's National Legislative Action Committee. Today, Steve will be discussing analyzing contracts. Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you, Angela, and it's hard to follow up Michael and Jordan. But now I get an opportunity to teach you all in 15 minutes how to ruthlessly negotiate with both of them when you decide to hire either FirstService or DW Smith. It's good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk to you in about 15 minutes what has taken many lawyers many years to acquire the knowledge and experience to do. But I'm gonna talk about a lot of concepts in contracts that you should be mindful of as board members and also as managers, things to look for in proposals. But in general, there's going to be a lot of content thrown at you. I just want you to remember 3 things at the end of all this. Number 1, don't sign the proposal. Don't sign the proposal until you have somebody look at it, unless it's there's an exception to that, which we'll talk about. 2, send to your attorney. Don't be afraid to have them look at it. It's penny wise, pound foolish to end up in a situation that you wish you did. And 3rd, always remember that despite all the negotiations that take place and the things that go in a contract, the absolute best kind of contract is the one that you stick in the drawer and never have to read again when it's done. Because that means everything went well, there are no issues, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And that's my goal, and that's our goal as lawyers, is to get to that point where you are protected, while at the same time you got a deal done. We're not in this to kill deals, we're in this to make them happen, but at the same time provide protections for all the parties, especially our clients, the association. So let's go back to what I said first with respect to the proposal. Why is it so important that associations rid themselves of this practice that I see many get into, which is they call me and say, oh, we got a problem. This contractor walked off the job. They didn't do this right. They damaged this. Somebody's suing us over this. I said, okay, well, I don't remember you getting into contract with these people. Send me the contract. And they send me a half-a-page proposal with no protective provisions in there and pretty actually onerous provisions on there. And it's at that point where I have to say to them, well, I can't fix this now. these are what you're stuck with, and this is what we have to follow. But next time, give me a call. Don't be afraid to send it over. So it's very important to at least have your attorney look at it. If it's a nominal amount, I mean, a few $1,000s, most likely your attorney will look at it to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to come back to bite you in the butt and say go forward. But it costs him a couple of minutes to look at it. But otherwise, it's very important. I mean, I've had associations sign 2-page proposals for $500,000 jobs. It's mind blowing, but it happens. So the key takeaway is have your attorney look at it. So now that your attorney is looking at it, what are the things that are going to come up? What are the kind of provisions that the attorney is going to talk to you as a manager to convey to your board or directly to the board? All kinds of contracts are different, the scope of work, right? But at its core, there's going to be a lot of what many people call boilerplate provisions that do end up getting negotiated and are important. I'm the kind of lawyer that doesn't get paid by the word. I think the best contract is the shortest contract you can make it to avoid ambiguity, interpretation, and make sure people actually read it and understand it. But there are things in there that might be considered boilerplate that are, oh, sorry about that. I didn't turn that off. Hold on one second. That are important. So I want to go through some of them. So first, to me, the most important is that the contract fully recognizes what the scope of work is, what the association is hiring the contractor to do, right? And that could be that could include things like the standard of care and what the contractor is expected to maintain in terms of industry standards or the quality of the work being provided, but also the specifics, right? Was Jordan involved in preparing specifications, or another engineer involved in preparing specifications that went out to bid that the contractors have to provide? You want to make sure that those are incorporated into your contract. You want to make sure there's no ambiguity. You're hiring a landscaper, right? Is the grass going to be cut at half an inch or 2 inches? You're going to pay for all that. What is, on a snow contract, how soon are they going to go out and shovel? Where are they going to dump the snow? Whose monitoring service are we going to use to measure whether it was 2 inches, 3 inches, or 7 inches, and how much we owe the contractor for that plowing? When are they able to de-ice or provide those services? So the scope of work is important, that it is specific to the needs of the association. And then you have the protective provisions, things like damages, right? What happens if a contractor damages the property? You want to assume that, right, the contractor is going to be obligated to do that, but absent specific provisions on when that has to take place, it could lead you to litigation, right? Who has to notice who? How long does a contractor have? Do you have provisions in place that you can do the work as the association yourself and set off monies that you owe to the contractor? Insurance, huge issue in contracts, right? And it shouldn't come as a surprise why, right? But it's important that your contractors are providing you their certificates of insurance with adequate coverage for all the types of policies, right? It's not enough to have a blanket, policy or liability policy. You should be asking, I want to make sure that you have workers' comp. I want to make sure you have auto liability if you have automobiles involved in the service, and those sorts of things. Personal, property and personal injury liability. You want to see that COI before you allow the work to go, and you would like to have the association and Michael and FirstService listed as their additional insureds when they're your managing agents, right? Those are the types of things we look at for insurance. You're also going to have provisions that talk about indemnification. I would say, when you have a sophisticated party on the other side reading, the contract that we draft, this is probably the #1 provision that comes back that needs to be renegotiated, right? It's the provision that's probably the most heavily negotiated, and it's for a reason. The indemnification is an important provision. What happens if somebody sues the association because of their work? Who's responsible for defending it and for paying out any damages, right? What happens if there is something unrelated, to the scope of work that they're providing, but one of their employees on site happens to do something that causes damage or injury or loss? Who's responsible? So things like attorney's fees, who's paying for it? Things like who gets to pick the defense counsel? When does that happen? Does it happen when a claim is made, or do we have to go all the way to the end to let a judge decide who really is culpable or contributory towards the negligence. It ends up being, heavily negotiated because, contractors, rightfully so, don't want to find themselves in a position where some, individual in a community who doesn't mind their business decides to make a claim whether it's accurate or not, and the contractor then has to defend that claim under indemnification. So obviously there's a give and take on this, but usually we're able to find a middle ground whereby a mutual indemnification is provided. Right, the contractor is going to want some protection from the association that if they have done nothing wrong, but there's something, there's a claim against the association and them for nothing that was their negligence or acts or omissions, that there's some mutual protection there. So that's a provision that you usually want your attorneys to take a look at. Here's one that is almost never in proposals that are signed by the association, and ones that I always insist on being in. Termination provisions, right? How often do associations get into long-term contracts with vendors only for 6 months or a year later decide things aren't working out, I want to terminate Steve, send him a letter, that I have to come back and say, hey, you didn't agree on termination rights, you got another 2 years under this contract. So we often want to build in clear termination rights, and if you can't get termination without cause, or for convenience we sometimes call it, because sometimes contractors will push back, understanding that they need to hire people sometimes for jobs and order supplies, so they need that security. You at least want to build in clear instructions for how you would terminate for cause, with the notices for cure periods and things like that. You don't want any ambiguity in termination, because hey, when it's time that you want to terminate, you can be sure if it's a good contract for the contractor, they're going to fight you on it if there's any ambiguity in that termination provision. And it's a good time to remind everybody, remember, at the time you signed a contract, everybody loves everybody, right? You never think at the time you signed a contract that anything's going to go wrong. Your best friends, your brothers at the time, you think it's going to go swimmingly. Nobody ever thinks, oh, 6 months from now after I sign this, I'm going to be suing your ass, right? So that's why it's important for your attorneys to be worrying about these things now in anticipation of those things in the future. Again, best contract, the one that's thrown in the draw. I want to touch on something that, it's not in every contract at all, but certainly for your higher end contracts, things that you're going to have several $100,000s of work being performed. And first of all, if you're going to have major work performed, I do highly recommend that you hire a quality engineering firm to perform the specifications, to do the bidding for that. So you have, a scope of work that is applicable and, driven towards your particular property. But aside from that, I cannot stress enough, having gone through a couple of experiences recently where it became fruitful, that when you have a contractor to perform several $100,000s of work or more, $1 million of work, do not be penny wise and pound foolish. Require bonding, okay? Think about performance bonds and payments bonds. And what they do, if you're not familiar with it, is you have a contractor in the middle of a job, goes bankrupt, goes belly up, or walks off the job. You're stuck with, a half completed garage, you're stuck with half completed roof. What do you do in that situation? You have some supplies over there. You want to hire another contractor, but they're going to want to be paid the same thing as the first contractor, and they're holding the bag, the first contractor. So what do? You have bonding. And I've had the experience with this, just in the last few years, where a contractor has gone bankrupt in the middle or has gone belly up. You contact that surety company, and I can tell you, I was amazed at how quickly we were able to get that resolved and get the surety's contractor in there to finish the job at no expense to us, and they take care of the issue with the first contractor. They'll go after it, but you get the job done. Payment bonds, it's the same thing, only with respect to making sure that the suppliers and the subcontractors of the contractor you're contracting with are being paid for their work, right? If subcontractor's not paid, if a supplier's not paid, they're very likely to place a lien, a lien against your property, which you don't want, which, by the way, is another provision that you want your attorneys to include in your contracts. But payment bonds take care of that for you, that in the event one of their subs, one of their suppliers is not paid the way they're supposed to, the bond kicks in so that no lien or encumbrance is placed against your property. So, that was, and I don't know how long that took, but that was a very, very, very brief synopsis, all designed to get across the point that these are not back of the napkin type of decisions that you are making as a board. You have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that when you contract with vendors, whether it's for $5,000 or $5 million, that you are doing so in a manner that protects your association, not just now, but also in the future. So with that, I'll happily entertain any questions that there are.
Yes, we do have questions, Steve. First one, how do you feel about requiring arbitration to resolve disputes in a contract?
Okay, so yes, part of the contract should describe what the dispute resolution terms are. When there is a dispute, do the parties have to go right to court? Is there, an ADR provision, as we're required to provide to homeowners? So there should be some spelling out. And, over the last 20, 30 years, arbitration requirements have become very, very common. I will say that each situation is unique, right? What we have found recently in the last decade or so is that the nice thing about arbitration, a lot of reason that they became so popular many years ago, the time and the cost. It was cheaper to go through arbitration and it was quicker to get a result. It's starting to slowly become about the same as the courts. We had an arbitration matter that lasted nearly 3 years and cost, we calculated it would have cost more than it would have had to go to court, because you don't have to pay the judge when you go to court, you have to pay the arbitrator, right? So I do like the arbitration provisions if there's clear rules that are built into the contract of what's to follow, if there's clear rules as to who the arbitrator is going to be or how the arbitrator is selected and how the costs are going to be allocated amongst the parties. But it is a question for the board to have with their attorney whether or not it's a good decision to require arbitration.
Okay, and what are some of the more common provisions in the proposals that are removed or revised?
So we talked about it a little bit. So the things that I think I see the most in proposals that I need to get rid of or modify are actually things that are not in there at all that we want to add. The biggest problem with proposals is their lack of depth in the terms that we'd like to see in there. But as far as things that are in there, usually it's things related to payment, how payments are going to be made, how quickly they have to be made, and what the damage, what the penalties are going to be when they're not made. We want to build in some protections for you guys as well. We know that the board meets usually at most on a monthly basis, right? So how often is the board going to be able to meet to approve bills? So sometimes 30 days is not sufficient for your association if you're not going to have enough time to be able to review and approve those bills. You also want to make sure that there's punch lists built in and the ability, if the contract so warrants, retainages from each invoices that you can keep to make sure that the work is all completed. So payment terms are a big thing in proposals. Again, the termination provisions. Indemnifications, usually in proposals, if there are any, they're the reverse. They're indemnifications from the association to the contractor and not the other way around. So those are some of the bigger things that you see in proposals that you want to pay attention to.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you so much. Just hang tight. We may have another question come in for you, so I'll let you know. I have a question for Michael. In these challenging times, what have you seen to be the most valuable things vendor partners can do to provide value to managers and boards?
I would definitely start with clarity and communication. I think, in these times, clarity is real important. I think Steve tapped into that a bit in not enough depth in contracts, I think, as a general, but that goes the same with alignment. What is exactly they're looking for or their suggestion, and making sure that it aligns with us and the board. So alignment and communication is without a doubt important, and without clarity, those two areas will not connect. So all three of those are where I would say the attention should be.
Thank you. Well, thank you. Those are all the questions for today. I'd like to thank our speakers and our attendees And attendees, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email or call the office, and we'll definitely put you in touch with the speakers. For now, that's all we have, and I hope to see everybody again next week. Have a good week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Bye.
much.